I'm going to talk now about choosing music as a reflective voluntary, or perhaps for playing during the distribution of Holy Communion. Music that you might choose for these parts of the service needs to be quiet in character, probably slow moving, and certainly not exciting or distracting. When you're picking a piece, you'll want to avoid anything that has harsh dissonances or passages that have extended dissonances. The musical language should be solemn and calm, and so music from the Baroque period is very suitable for this purpose. But that's not to say that there isn't lots of lovely Romantic and 20th century music which is also suitable for this purpose. When choosing music for a reflective part of the service, your choice of stops is particularly important, because the character of the stops and their volume will influence the overall effect of the piece. I've chosen a couple of examples to illustrate this. First of all, we have a piece Schmücke dich, o liebe Seele, by the 18th century German composer Georg Friedrich Kaufmann. And it comes from one of Anne Marsden Thomas's graded organ anthologies. This is book 3. Most of the pieces in this book are for manuals only. Kaufmann's music is very useful because there is a very large amount of very straightforward and very playable music. Much of it is based on Lutheran chorale tunes. This particular one is a communion hymn, and although it might not be well known to congregations in this part of the world, because it is a communion hymn, the character of the music makes it very suitable for playing during communion. These books are also useful because the editor suggests strategies for practice and also choices of registration. And she suggests that this piece be played with a solo registration in the right hand and an accompaniment in the left hand. The solo registration in the right hand is playing a slightly decorated version of the hymn tune, and the left hand is playing slightly faster moving chordal passages. Therefore, we want something soft but clear in the left hand and something quiet and singing in the right hand. On this organ we have lots of choices. A useful accompanimental registration is this stop, dolce, although you won't find this stop very commonly on organs, but you will find a similar stop, dulciana, or you might find a stop like solitional on the swell, which we also have here, which will give you a clear but quiet accompaniment. So here I'm going to use the dolce on the great, and then I'm going to use a soft registration on the swell. We could, for example, use the oboe with the swell box partly closed, and it will sound something like this. We could use a flute-like registration as well. The 8-foot flute and the 4-foot flute on the swell. Or we could use a softer stop on the swell as the accompaniment. For example, the flute with the swell box closed. And a string stop on the great. Here we're using the viola, which you will find often is called gamba on many organs. have another example of an appropriate reflective piece here, which is for manuals and pedals. And it comes from this book, Oxford Service Music for Organ, which is also edited and compiled by Anne Marsden Thomas. This book suggests detailed registrations for all of the pieces and also gives useful suggestions for changes of manuals and changes of stops during the pieces. I've chosen this piece, Vesper Voluntary No. 3 by the English composer Edward Elgar. And the editor has suggested that we use swell flute 8 and a string 8. Here I'm going to use the silitional, a quiet string stop, and the swell box closed. And the great flute 8, here we're using the stop diapason, which is the only 8-foot stop on this organ that has a clear flute character on the great. And the editor also suggests pedal flute 16, so here we will use the pedal bourdon, which is a stop that most of you will find on your organs. And then couplers, swell to great, coupling the two manuals together, and swell to pedal. And the opening of this piece begins just on the swell, and then the pedal enters, and the melody is repeated on the great, on the solo registration, here on the stop diapason, with the accompaniment on the swell. And it sounds something like this. You can see here that I followed the instructions in the score for small crescendos and diminuendos, here using the swell box, which was possible because I started with the swell box closed, and I was able to make subtle crescendos and diminuendos just using the swell box. So even a very simple piece with very simple registration can be very effective if the registration is well chosen. Later on in this series of videos, I'll talk a little bit about how to prepare voluntaries before you perform them in the context of a service.